Hello friends, today is Tuesday, March 24th, 2020. I wanted to film a little bit of a different video today, so just to break up what we've been reading normally with a series of unfortunate events. So today I'm going to read you a little picture book that I love. This was one of my favorite books as a kid. The title is on the side here. It's called The Little House, and it is by a woman, let's see, and it also used to belong to my mom, and it belonged to me when I was a little girl. So first it was hers, then it was mine, and now I have it here at my house so I can read it to you. It's called The Little House, a new math story game by Jane Thayer, illustrated by Don Madden. And this woman is from Massachusetts. Jane Thayer, I believe she lived in Truro, according to this little About the Author page over here. And this book is pretty old, from 1971 or earlier. The Little House. Mrs. Meadow lived in a little house on a beautiful hill in the country. She loved her little white house. And there's Mrs. Meadow, and there's her little white house. But one day she said to herself, "How big and lonely my parlor feels with only me rocking in my chair and Clarabelle Cat asleep." There's her and her chair and her cat. And there's her living room. I always love these illustrations so much. "How quiet and lonely my kitchen seems with only the kettle steaming on the stove and the clock tick-tocking on the wall, and how long and lonely the road looks winding over the hill. How I wish some company would come," said Mrs. Meadow. And there she is looking out her window, and Clarabelle Cat at her feet. The next day it began to snow. It snowed until the ground was white around the house and the road was white over the hill. There's her house covered in snow. A man came and knocked at the door. "My truck's getting off the road," he said to Mrs. Meadow. "It won't go. May I come in and get my feet warm?" "Oh, do come in," said Mrs. Meadow, and she took the man into her cozy kitchen. Good, she thought, I've got company. Now there are two people in her house. The snow kept falling. Another man knocked at the door. "My car is stalled in the snow," he said. "It won't go. May I come in and get my hands and feet warm?" "Come right in," said Mrs. Meadow. She felt quite excited to have this unexpected company. There's the outside the house with the cars in the snow. It snowed and snowed until the cars in the road were almost buried. A man and a lady and a boy and a girl knocked at the door and said, "Our trailer is stuck in a snowdrift. May we come in and get warm?" "I'll be pleased to have you," said Mrs. Meadow. Now she was really happy. So there's all these people in her house. And there is her house in the snow with their cars stuck and the new family walking up to the door. The snow kept falling. More cars became stuck in the snow as they tried to get over the hill. More people kept coming to the door of the little house. There's all the cars and everybody coming from their car to come up to Mrs. Meadow's house. They filled the parlor. They filled the kitchen. Will my old floors hold them all? Mrs. Meadow wondered, and still the snow kept falling. There they are in the house. It's Mrs. Meadow in the blue right here. And here's all of her guests in her living room. The children took turns petting Clarabelle Cat. They took turns rocking in Mrs. Meadow's chair. Then they said, "We're hungry." And there's Mrs. Meadow talking to all the children. Mrs. Meadow looked in her refrigerator. "I have enough eggs for the children," she said. "I have no eggs for the grown-ups. But I have lots of cookies, and I'll make biscuits to eat with my strawberry jam." She cooked the eggs for the children. She brought out the crock of cookies. She made some biscuits and opened the strawberry jam. Soon all the cookies and biscuits were gone. But the children were still hungry. Mrs. Meadow thought, "I know what I have," she cried. "Marshmallows!" She opened her cupboard and took out a big bag of marshmallows. There's all the children at the table. Love the colors and the illustrations. We'll toast them in the fireplace. Will somebody please build a fire, she said. A man built a fire in the fireplace. When it had burned down to glowing coals, Mrs. Meadow brought a long-handled fork and put a marshmallow on it. You'll have to take turns toasting, she said. There's only one fork and all of these children. And there they are, making the fire. The children took turns holding a marshmallow over the glowing coals until it turned golden brown. There were plenty of plump, golden, gooey, soft marshmallows for all. Then they were sleepy. I have only 2 beds besides my own, said Mrs. Meadow. 3 children went to sleep in one bed. 2 went to sleep in the other. The ladies curled up in chairs. The men slept on the floor. Soon everyone was asleep. There's everybody curled up sleeping. Except Mrs. Meadow. She lay listening to the sounds of the sleeping children, the creaking of her little old house, and the tapping of the snow on the window. She was glad that her warm little house could shelter all these people on such a cold, snowy night. There she is. In the morning, the snow had stopped falling. The sun shone brightly on a glistening world. All the men hurried out of the little house. They borrowed Mrs. Meadow's snow shovel. They took turns shoveling their way to the road and digging out their cars. Then the snowplow came chugging up the hill. And here's the road, the house, the next day. And there's the snowplow coming to get everybody out. Now all the cars could move. What a commotion! Starters buzzed, engines roared, chains clanked. Goodbye and thank you very much, called the children to Mrs. Meadow. We'll write to you. Goodbye, thank you, the grown-up said. You'll hear from us. Goodbye, good luck, said Mrs. Meadow. The last car pulled out of the snow and rounded the bend in the road. The sound of the last motor died away down the hill. Mrs. Meadow stood in her door looking after the cars. It was nice having company, she said. Then she looked about and she said to herself, but how beautiful and peaceful the hill is now. She went into her little house and shut the door. How lovely and quiet my kitchen feels with only the kettle steaming on the stove and the clock tick-tocking on the wall. She looked around her parlor and gave a contented sigh. How nice and big my parlor feels with no one here but Clarabelle Cat and my rocking chair just for me. It's nice to have company come, she thought, but it's nice to be alone again after they've all gone home. That's not the end of the story, though. Here comes the mail. One day, when the snow had melted and green grass was showing on the hill, the postman brought some letters and packages to Mrs. Meadow's house in his truck. Mrs. Meadow opened letters and cards from the children. She unwrapped presents from the people who had stayed in her house that snowy night. There they are on the table. She found a box of oranges. She found boxes of cookies. She found boxes of candy. She found warm blankets for all her beds, a pillow for her rocking chair. She even found a catnip mouse for Clarabelle Cat. And Mrs. Meadow said happily to herself as she rocked in her rocking chair with Clarabelle dozing on her lap, "It was nice to have company come, and it's nice to know that they thought about me after they all went home." And that is it. That's the end of the story. I really, really enjoyed that story. Whoop. That was one of my favorites as a kid. I just love the illustrations, as I said, and I loved the story. I didn't even realize that it was a math story until I was just now rereading it as an adult and looking at the beginning pages. So I hope you enjoyed this little picture book, and I have some more picture books that I brought from my mom's house that were mine when I was a kid, so I will definitely try to throw some of those in there and read those with you as the days go on. So I hope you are having a great Tuesday, and I'll be back tomorrow. I'll read chapter 6 of a series of unfortunate events, The Bad Beginning, tomorrow. All right, I hope everyone has a great evening. I'll see you tomorrow. Bye.